computer. Okay, welcome to Creative Conversations. As most of you know, I'm Rebecca Tolk, your host, artist and photographer, and I have a very special guest with me today. His name's Dick Harbers, and he is an NLP master practitioner. NLP stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming. And we're here today to talk about creativity. Before I let you introduce yourself, or before I ask you to introduce yourself and tell us what NLP is, I have a question, and I am curious to know what creativity means to you, what your definition of creativity is.
Creativity, I guess, is different for different people, but for me, it's when that sort of internal, we can access that internal ways of thinking in our own particular way, and then expressing that outwardly. It always starts internally, for me at least, and then it comes out in maybe writing. As I say, a writer might come out as an artist with paint work. It might come out as a musician. It might come out as a photographer, taking pictures in particular ways. But it's some internal desire to express ourselves in our own particular way, which might be similar to others, but there'll be quite a deal of individuality in there as well, because every person experiences the world in their own subjective way. So you will seldom get creativity that's exactly a replicant of anybody else's, unless, of course, they're copying somebody else.
True. Do you find that it's different for artists than people who aren't artists?
Well, there's many versions of art, I suppose.
True. I know, I heard myself say that. I mean, to some degree, I think everyone is an artist somewhere inside them.
Yeah, I mean, you can call any creative venture art of a sort, and there's craftsmanship and artisanship. And craftsmanship tends to use the tools in a particular way of using the tools that basically does the same thing over and over in high quality work. And then an artisan then creates something new, something different that hasn't been done before with those tools. So sometimes some people need to learn the craft first before they become an artisan. Some have the artistic work inside, and it can start a bit amateurish because they haven't really worked the craft yet. But sometimes in the amateurism too, of course, there's a whole different way of being artistic and creative as well. So I don't think we need to limit ourselves to only being good at the tools to allow our creativity to come forth.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, creativity is very playful. It's like accessing that place of play inside me and allowing it to come out. And for me, it's sometimes easier to do it when it's not connected to my photography business, like when I'm sewing clothes or playing with fiber art. Like there's sometimes a lot more freedom in play and creativity, but I'm learning to bring that into my photography, that just because I'm doing it as a business doesn't mean I can't also play and really allow my creativity out. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I stop, oh no, I got to go do marketing calls, and I got to go, run my business and do my taxes. And but I think for artists, it's always a constant learning to incorporate, to find that balance.
I think what you're saying is a lot of creativity comes from enjoyment and fun, play, and you can do that quite often in groups as well. You can see people when a group of children or a group of adults are having an enjoyable time, creativity often pops out all over the place. And at the same time, we can also, of course, be creative on our own. And often that might come initially sort of a daydreamy type thought about something that you then want to play with that and express that and bring it out through your particular medium, whatever that is. The interesting thing is whether we can then carry over the creativity energy into those things which are chores.
Yeah.
right?
Yes, that's where,
So,
yes.
and I think some accountants do that with what's called creative bookkeeping.
Ah, true. We all have our own version of creativity and bringing into harmony with all the other aspects of our lives.
Mm, mm.
What about the people that are highly creative from a place of pain? You know, like they make their best art in their time of darkness. I mean, that's totally opposite of play for me.
Well, I think some creativity comes from the need to process some issues we might have. Some might come as a distraction from our issues. I mean, some people in the extreme despair develop a creative escape or a creative outlet, right?
True.
So there can be different motivations or underlying processes within ourselves that bring a creative energy to the forth. And when you think about, you know, in particular, even in war zones, people have to be very creative to stay alive, for example.
True.
Right? So creativity isn't only in that pleasure state, but that's the one that's the most fun. The other is survival. The other is survival.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Maybe now would be a good time to introduce yourself and tell us what NLP is and how it does help access more of our creativity, whether it comes from play or pain. Because I guess I have experienced both. Although I create best from play, for sure. For me personally.
Well, you're driven by fun more than non-fun, right? That's your driving focus, is have fun in life, which is a great focus.
Yeah.
And that's partly because there have been aspects of your life which haven't been fun. You'd rather have the fun than not so fun.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because everybody experiences the world in their own very subjective way, NLP has discovered, we all know that already, but discovered how that actually happens in the neurology and thought process. Because NLP, the words neuro-linguistic programming, as you mentioned, really explain how our neurology, neurons, brain, are programmed by our words. So what people say to us causes us to think in certain ways.
True.
For the same manner, though, what people are actually saying also gives us a indication of how they've already been programmed by previous experiences in their lives. The interesting thing is that these programs that are usually subconscious and just expressed of how we are as a person, through our personality, through our reactions to people, through our interactions with people, those subconscious programs are generally speaking running our lives because we're not constantly paying attention to our thoughts. We're just experiencing life.
Yeah.
And many of those programs are very creative, proactive, supportive, and some programs are not so supportive and they're more reactive. And the good news is that our creative self inside can help actually update the old programs to new and better ones that serve us better. So that's a capability we have once we first learn how to recognize which programs are running. And then we just use our conscious mind to basically pay attention to the programs. And there's several ways you can update them. There's one way you can some people use affirmations to try and override the old programs. I find that not so useful because it's basically trying to suppress the old programs, is more a management strategy than an updating strategy. But I've discovered for myself and working with others that once we acknowledge the negative programs without judging them, that's a tricky thing, to not judge our negativity, right? Totally. Once we simply acknowledge it and allow it and accept it, and then in a particular different ways, and just no longer fight it, which most people do, just by accepting it and thanking it and acknowledging it, it often just updates to a new way of thinking almost instantly. Because we've discovered, not only myself, but some of the founders of NLP have mentioned the same thing, that our system doesn't want to hurt. Our system doesn't want to be negative. These programs we've learned when we were younger. And when we no longer fight those bits inside that having these stressful messages to us, we just accept them as messages, then our system will automatically update to the next best step towards resolution. So the whole system, our whole physiological, neurological system is actually a creative process to creation towards goodness, towards betterness, towards resolution. So we're actually naturally creative beings. I mean, but when you look at all the species on the planet, the humans are the most creative. Even if they're creating destruction, it's still a creative process. So we're naturally, in that sense, we're naturally creative.
Can you give us an example of like updating the process that you take people through, or just a short, like on me, maybe like of shifting or updating that negative belief to the creative one or the positive one?
Well, I'll just give you an example. One person I worked with some time back.
Yeah.
The chap was a naturopath, and he was setting up a new business because he'd had enough rescuing people through his naturopathy program. So he decided to become a landscape gardener. But it was at a workshop. He didn't attend the workshop, but his partner did. And I just taught people how to update some of these programs. And after the workshop, we were chatting, and he was sharing how he'd been going with updating getting his business together. But he needed a trailer to cart around all this stuff for his landscape gardening. And he said, it's really hard to get the right trailer for the right price. Now, that statement may be true in his experience, but it's actually a belief of the reality. It's what we call a limiting belief. So his partner who'd done my workshop said to him, Richard, that's a belief. He said, no, it's true. She said, no, it's a belief. He says, no, it's true. Now, when we have a belief, we'll defend our belief. Just a thought, just a thought program. So he said, well, look, Dick just taught us it's a belief. So let's pretend it's a belief, and we'll do a process to help you update it. So she took him through the process where she simply invited him to close his eyes, because when your eyes are closed, you sort of ignore the outer world and you're more in tune with what's happening inside your head and your feelings. And she just got him to put the belief up on an imaginary screen in his mind. Words, hard to get the right trailer for the right price. And she said, well, look, just thank that belief for having given you that life experience. Of experiencing it's hard to get the things that you want. Now, as soon as he thanked that belief, they just dropped off the screen automatically. So the belief was gone.
Wow.
And he sat back in surprise because he didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And they said, now that you've thanked that belief for having given you that life experience, because these programs, belief is a program, their function is to create our life experience.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway, she said, now let the new belief come up that you're ready for. Now that you've had that life experience of finding things difficult to have what you want. He said, oh, she said, what happened? Well, on the screen's come a new belief that says you can have anything you want anytime you want. Now that's a pretty big, that's a pretty big upgrade, right?
Yes.
From trailer to anything, but you can have it instead of not having it.
Yeah.
He said, wow, they said, now that's great. That's a great new belief. How about you let that come off the screen into your mind, into places in your body where the old belief used to be. And he just, and they come off just went into him. He just saw it coming in. And so it's again it's how we use our words that's programming our neurology. Totally. So by that suggestion, he took it. And the interesting thing was, there was another person at this discussion because we're having breakfast on the Monday morning after the program, and this chap was a boarder living in the house. He hadn't done the program. He said, he said, while you guys have been talking, he said, I've been daydreaming here. And I was thinking, Richard, do you need a trailer? And Richard, yeah. I said, well, I've got one. It's a wooden one, good nick. And he was more looking for a wooden trailer. And he said, I'm not using it. You might, like, if you want it, you can buy it. If you haven't got the money, you can borrow it for 3 months and see if it suits you. So, and this trailer was in the yard of the house we were talking in. In the house of the place he was living in. It had been there all along. But because he had the belief it's hard, neither he noticed it nor the person who owned him knows it. Because once we have a belief, people around us will act as if that belief is true to match our programs.
Mm.
We can do the same with creativity.
Mm.
We often don't notice our creative because some people believe they're not creative.
Mm.
Some
True.
people believe they're not good enough in what they do to be called creative.
Yeah, I've
Right?
done that. I mean, I've had
Yeah,
that belief for sure.
yeah, yeah. So there are processes we can update our creativity beliefs.
Yes.
And when we do that, then suddenly people start exploring their creative talents in all sorts of ways they never would have imagined. Now, I know
Mm.
with you, for example, some work we've done with you.
Mm.
When I first met you, your creative paradigm was quite narrow.
Yeah.
You're looking at a particular, remote photography, which is a great thing. I never heard
Yeah.
of it. It was an amazing process, and I saw some of the work you've done. I thought it was very good. But once we started working through some of the issues and beliefs you had about your abilities and range, I noticed over the time the possibilities of different things you could focus your work on, even though it was mostly in photography, but not only. It sort of branched out to all sorts of greater range of possibilities, still being fully creative, still fulfilling your creative desires, but
Yeah.
also you're also appealing to a far wider market
Mm-hmm.
because people have different, appreciate different types of art, different expressions of art.
Yeah.
So that serves you very well. You can still use exactly the same creative energy,
Mm.
apply it to your photography or other areas that you find fascinating,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
for
suddenly
sure.
there's a whole bunch of people that wouldn't have been interested before. Now, this is new. Rebecca's doing something different now. Wow,
Mm.
things like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely felt myself opening up a lot. I mean, for those that don't know, I started working with Dick at middle of quarantine. Was looking for NLP practitioner, and I
Mhm.
had been pretty shut down and depressed, and figuring stuff out.
Mm.
So in the work we've done together and in changing my limiting beliefs and my old programs, I have found just a lot more freedom in making art, a lot more creativity, a lot more play, a lot more allowance of exploring a new subject matter or a new editing style or a new way of shooting. There's just been so much more, I guess, freedom and allowance.
Oh, also, I think from memory that there was also some more explorations in more creative ways of marketing as well, more alternate ways of marketing, perhaps. So even some of the creativity sort of, once our creativity starts to really flow, it can be applied in any of our endeavors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely, I could see that that's helping me in other parts of my life. And it's good that you told the story about the man needing the trailer and believing he couldn't have it or afford it or whatever it was, because David and I, my partner and I, are moving soon to another city. And we both have this belief that we can't get the type of house we want for the money we're spending. And I'm seeing that now that you brought that up. So I'm going to have a talk with him and see if we can update our belief so that we can live where we want with the budget that we have, that it is possible for now.
That's an interesting aspect too, because when I had to move house one time, we had a very limited time frame. And my partner and I at the time said, okay, this is what we want in a house, like not exactly color and stuff like that, but 3 bedrooms and all the basic criteria we wanted. And the time frame, and that our budget was limited. And so my partner went for a walk one day, saw a house that was unlived in. So we called up the local city council and asked who was paying the land taxes, the rates. Called them up and said, look, do you want a caretaker to live in this house for you at a caretaker's rent? And they said, yeah, that'd be great. So we nominated the rent, which was very manageable for us. We were there for 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And suited us. We weren't intending to buy the place. We weren't in that state to do that. But it was overlooking the ocean. It was open plan, beautiful place. Inside, it was great. Outside looked pretty scruffy, but we didn't care because the scruffy place don't attract. The people think, there's nothing in there of steel, so I won't bother going in there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it had all that we asked for in good state. We did give it a coat of paint because it was a little bit old in that sense. But apart from that, everything was working. We even walked down the path before we called up the council and opened the door and walked in, so it wasn't even locked. So once you get clear on what you want, and you know, that's important.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are clear on what they don't want.
Yeah.
And that's what they'll create, what they don't want, if they haven't updated what they want instead. So that's another part of the creative process, getting really clear, being okay about what you don't want, in the sense that, oh, no, I don't want that, I want this instead, and then get clear on what you want instead. And then your neurology and your physiology and all that's going on inside, its function is to help you create what you want. Now, that's both in your creativity of your arts and stuff, but also in the creativity of your life generally.
Totally. So
some
true.
people call that the law of attraction, and all we're doing really is attracting what our thoughts are emitting. You know, don't think of a green elephant, so people think of green elephants. And a lot of people think of what they don't want. That's one of the big issues for people, that they're constantly creating that which they don't want, because that's what they're focusing on. So the more we can focus on our desired outcomes, that which we wish to have in any part of our lives, including our fun. You wanted fun, so you're creating more fun. Right?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
it's where you put your attention, basically.
That's interesting. Yeah, that was great. Good examples, good story. So I guess for now, we're going to sign off shortly. If anyone is catching this on the replay and has questions for Dick, drop them below. There's also his link is above this. I'm looking at my phone to see if any comments come up. The link to his Facebook group, where he shares more NLP work, and where you can contact him, is there if you're interested. He helps with all kinds of things, not just accessing creativity, but just, you know, living a better life. And goodness, I don't know how to just, I mean, the work for me has helped me move into a new paradigm of my own creating and living a life that I love, and learning how to see that and create that and make choices to move towards it.
Yeah, that's really important, isn't it, that people live their own lives? Because a lot of people are still living from a certain age what was set up by their parents and the carers when they were young. So there's not necessarily any ill intentions on their part. They were doing the best they could. They were parenting the way they learned.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, we've got to say, oh, well, hang on, I've got to live my life, right? What my life is about. Once we start living the life that's our life, then we're on a pretty good space.
Yeah.
Good place to be.
Yeah. Indeed. All right. So we don't have any questions popping up right now, so we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I wanted to share you with my community because the work I've been doing with you has been so powerful, and and I just really appreciate the work that you bring to the world and to everyone. So thank you for that.
And just one last comment, that particular picture on my Facebook group, the background is actually one of Rebecca's pictures that I chose to have as one of my backgrounds. As well as the one behind me at the moment, which is a virtual background. Yeah. So I'm very pleased and thankful to Rebecca for having given me some really good backgrounds for my work. So
yes,
she's very creative in what she does. So.
Oh yes, he's got Florida behind him in the Philippines, where he lives. So it's a global community these days.
It is
no space between us. So. All right. Well, thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.